Hey everyone, welcome back to another review. Today we're going to be taking a look at both versions of Papo's Acrocanthosaurus, their 2017 version and their 2018 version. I figured this would be a good time to go back and do some reviews on some older figures. I don't have a lot of new stuff at the moment to review, so if there's anything in particular you guys want to see that is older, I have a ton of stuff from Papo, Collecte, Rebor, Safari, and PNSO, so if there's anything on the channel I haven't gotten to yet, just let me know in the comments and I'll try to make that happen. So getting back to these two beautiful Acrocanthosaurs from Papo, Acrocanthosaurus is my favorite large carnivorous dinosaur, and the Papo Acrocanthosaurus mold is hands down my favorite Papo model of all time currently. Acrocanthosaurus was a very large theropod dinosaur from the early Cretaceous period of North America. Its fossils have been found in Oklahoma, Texas, and Wyoming, and one of its distinguishing characteristics is that it had very tall neural spines going down its back that most likely supported a ridge of muscle. So let's start with the first version that Papo released, which is the 2017 rainbow-colored Acrocanthosaurus. This figure came out in 2017, and when it got released, I think it was about the middle of the summer, and then it was very surprisingly retired in 2018. I think this figure was maybe available for 6 to 8 months, which is very short time for a Papo figure to be out and then abruptly retired. But as soon as they retired it, they did announce the more naturalistic looking 2018 version, which is still currently in production. So let's move the 2018 version off to the side for the time being, and to start out with a couple quick measurements. This figure is about 11.5 inches long from the snout to the tip of the tail, or about 30 centimeters, and just under 6 inches tall to the tip of the tail, or about 15 centimeters. Acrocanthosaurus was about 38 feet long. So with those measurements, that'll put this figure somewhere in the 140 scale range. This Acro is sculpted in a crouching position pose. Its right arm is resting on the ground, and Papo is known for giving their figures kind of unique poses, and I do really like this. It looks like this Acrocanthosaurus is ducking down and about to lunge forward at whatever prey it's deciding to attack. Even though it is in a tripod pose with this hand resting on the ground right here to support it, technically this figure isn't a tripod. If you just put it up on a raised structure, you can see, just make sure the claws are off it, you can see it has no problem balancing on its two legs. The 2017 version is painted in the rainbow color scheme. Papo has used this rainbow color on a few of their figures. They've used it on both their standing and running T-Rex and their Velociraptor. Personally, I'm not a fan of their rainbow coloration, but for some reason on this Acrocanthosaurus, I think it looks really, really nice. It's not as obnoxious looking like on their T-Rexes. So let's zoom in and take a look at that beautiful head sculpt on this Acro. You can see a lot of finely sculpted scales along the head right here, and even along the lower jaw. You got a lot, like a batch of larger scales right here, and they go into smaller scales. Just a lot of fine detail work on it. Even got a nice bony ridge painted in gray along the top of the skull, and a nice black wash over there to bring out all that finely sculpted detail. I mean, just really, really look closely at the skull. There's so many different scale sizes on this head. It's just absolutely beautiful to look at. The details just as nice on the 2018 one. We'll get to that one shortly. The color on the head is a mix of purple and gray, and you get some bright yellow spots along right here. And you can even, the skull is a little bit shrink wrapped. You could easily make out the orbit and the anterorbital fenestra, which on Acrocanthosaurus was actually quite large. It actually took up about a quarter of the skull, which is a weight-saving feature. The teeth on this figure are beautifully painted, no sloppiness. They are very, very sharp looking. The only problem I have with this figure is these two teeth on the bottom jaw right here. They are a lot longer than the rest of the teeth in the mouth, and they just kind of look out of place to me. It's just very weird that it just has these two bottom vampire teeth coming out of its jaw like that. Just a little distracting, but it's just a minor complaint on this figure. And then inside the mouth, it is just absolutely beautifully detailed. You can see a lot of nice detail along the tongue right here and along the gums on the jaw. And speaking of the jaw, it is articulated and it closes very, very well. Papo is definitely masters of the articulated jaw. The eyes on this figure are beautifully painted. You have a yellow eye with a black pupil and a red iris. It just looks really, really nice looking. And then going down the neck, you have more of that purple color, and you have a very dark orange stripe going down all the way to the tip of the tail with a dark maroon stripe below that still extends all the way down to the tip of the tail. And there's a lot of large scales along the side of this figure that go onto the shoulder and above the hip and along the tail, and each one of those is painted in white, and I think that looks really, really nice. There is a row of spikes down at the base of the head right here that continues all the way down the back and pops up again near the hip region, and those are painted in gray, and I think that is a very, very cool touch. And moving down to those very powerful looking hands, you can see all the scale detail on the arm. The arm is very well sculpted with a lot of muscle and a lot of nice scale detail on the hands and fingers. The claws are nice and sharp looking. They're painted in a light gray color. And if you look at the inside of the hands right here, you can see a lot of very fine scale sculpted, which you usually see fine scales like that when you need a lot of movement. And then right after the wrist, it just transitions into the larger scale. I think that is a fantastic touch. Even on the feet right here, between the webbing of the feet where there would be the most toe movement, you can see a lot of fine scales right there. Beautiful, beautiful touch. And taking a look at the rest of the body, you can see a lot of folds and wrinkles and patches of scale sculpted in on this figure. There's even a pad on the back of the feet. Flipping it over, you can see some large scales near its chest and a lot of nice scale detail along its stomach. And you can even see the dew claw is really, really well sculpted. I just love all the detail on the feet. These feet are just done absolutely beautifully. And on this side of the model, you can see the muscles and the skin stretching with this leg are all the way stretched back. Papo does a really, really nice job of making their figures look alive. They might not be the most accurate dinosaur figures on the market, but they are definitely the ones that look the most alive. So let's move the 2017 version off to the side and get to the 2018 version, which is hands down my favorite out of the two of them. Both these Acros are the same exact mold. With the 2018 version, Papo decided to go with a much more natural looking color scheme, which I absolutely love. I was disappointed they retired the Rainbow one so early, but when they announced its 2018 replacement, I was just blown away by this thing. The overall color scheme on this one is a mixture of browns and grays with these large black splotches that start near the arms and go all the way down to the tip of the tail. I just think that looks really, really good. I love the contrast of these dark blotches against that lighter background. I love how all those natural color tones brings out all those nice details on this beautiful head. And speaking of the head, I've heard a few people complain that the head looks a little bit too big on this Acrocanthosaurus, which is true. I said this model is in the 140 scale range. I measured the length of the head, and Acrocanthosaurus had a pretty big head, about 4.3 feet long. The head scale comes out to be about 130 scale, so the head is a little bit too big for the body on this thing, but I really don't think it looks too bad. I just think it just does look a tiny bit too big, but other than that, this figure is just absolutely gorgeous looking. Mixing in with all that gray and brown, you have these nice pink highlights along the fenestra right here and then along the ear, and that pinkish color continues along the top of the neck and just blends in when you get to about the shoulder blade. And the eye on this one is painted a little bit differently than the rainbow one. The rainbow one had a yellow eye, but the iris was painted red. This is just a straight up yellow eye with a black pupil, which still looks really, really nice looking. I just absolutely love the head on this thing. It just looks so alive. And you have more of that pinkish tone mixing in along the neural spines right here, continuing just about to this point on the tail, and there's a little bit of it along the thighs on the hind legs right here. And I just love all these darker blotches along the body and tail. Just really, really gives this Acrocanthosaurus a very, very natural look. Those larger scales on the rainbow version, which were painted in white, aren't painted or highlighted at all on this one, but I'm okay with that. You can still see them sculpted along the body. You can see them along the tail right here. But all in all, this 2018 version is hands down my absolute favorite Papo model of all time. Absolutely love this thing. So let's move on to some comparisons. I got a few other Acrocanthosaurus figures to compare this to, and a few other dinosaur species, and see how these figures stack up against them. Alright, first up for comparison is the Safari LTD Acrocanthosaurus, which is a really nice figure, but the Papo one just blows it away in size and detail. And I actually prefer the head shape on the Papo one over the Safari one. And here it is with the Batat Acrocanthosaurus. And even though this figure is almost 20 years old, it's still a very accurate figure. It just shows you how well the Batat line has held up after all these years. And next up is the Rebor Acrocanthosaurus, and this Acro is definitely one of my favorite products from Rebor. I just love the diorama that it came with, and I actually have the 2018 Papo Acro displayed with it. It's this animal's hunting mate, and I have it displayed next to my bed with my small dinosaur collection I keep on that side that my wife just can't stand. And I think these two just look really, really nice together in that diorama scene attacking the Deinonychus that brought down that Tenontosaurus. And here it is with Papo's juvenile Apatosaurus, and these two figures look absolutely great together. It almost looks like that they were meant to be. I've taken a ton of photos of both Acros taking down this poor Apatosaurus, and this is why I love Papo. They just give their figures such unique poses, and once in a while you just get a perfect pairing like this, and you just can't beat that. And you can't do Papo comparisons without the OG Papos. Here it is with the original green stand-in T-Rex and the old brown Velociraptor. So final thoughts on these Acros. If you haven't figured it out by now, I absolutely love this Acrocanthosaurus from Papo. They are one of my favorite dinosaurs to photograph outside. I've taken tons of pictures of them hunting and chasing dinosaurs and ripping stuff apart. Absolutely love these things. I only have a couple complaints. Like I said, the head is just a tiny bit too big for the body, and those longer teeth coming out of the bottom jaw just a tiny bit distracted, but those are minor complaints. I just think these figures are pretty much perfect in my opinion. And like I said earlier about the 2017 version, it's now retired. It wasn't even in production for a year, but surprisingly the price on it hasn't really skyrocketed yet. I see it on eBay somewhere around between $40 and $50, but with such a short production run, I do expect this figure to keep climbing in price throughout the years. So if you don't have it yet and you want it, I suggest you get it now before the price goes through the roof. Just look at the brown Velociraptor. That figure was in production for years, and now it's retired and people want it. It goes for about $100 to $150 on eBay, every once in a while when someone decides to get rid of one. So yeah, if you a Papo completionist, I do suggest you get this rainbow one as soon as you can. The 2018 version is still currently in production, and that figure, depending where you get it from, I order almost all my Papos from Everything Dinosaur. On their site, this figure is about $23, and shipping will be extra, so I'll leave a link to Everything Dinosaur in the description. I like supporting them. And if you feel like getting it off of Amazon, it averages about $33. I'll also leave a link to Amazon if you want to get it through them. And that will do it for the review. Like I said at the beginning of the video, if you guys have any suggestions about what figures you'd like to see me review, why I have this slight downtime between new stuff, just let me know in the comment section. And as always, don't forget to hit like and subscribe. Each subscription helps out the channel tremendously, and I'll greatly appreciate it. And I'll see you guys for the next one.